So welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to this session for our NoiseFloor afternoon, day 2. Today we've got Simon Holland with us from the Open University. And Simon is here representing the CHIME project. And CHIME stands for We've Just Established Computer-Human Interaction Network. Yeah, sort of. And it's a funded project by the EPSRC.
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me. So it's intimate. I'm very, very happy with that because mostly what I want to do is hear back from people kind of thing. So while we were in the last concert, let's see if there's, that's visible. Okay, so what we have here, obviously, is a room full of music practitioners. And there is this thing, human-computer interaction, or this thing, human-computer interaction. Now, if you'd asked me 10 or 20 years ago, then human-computer interaction would have been admittedly quite a boring thing and not very useful for present purposes. However, these days, there's actually lots of really useful, interesting stuff there. Now, the really good thing is that if you're a music practitioner, you've got a huge advantage over most people in getting to grips very productively, creatively, interestingly with human-computer interaction. Now, I'm not saying that's interesting because everybody should move over to human-computer interaction. What I'm saying is, as a music practitioner, if you pick up a bit more attunedness to human-computer interaction, that can really feed back and enrich things. At least that's my theory, that's my contention. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just throw out a bit of stuff for a short initial presentation and then find out from you if this sounds like it really stands up, basically. So, okay, so this is what it said in the program. Please interrupt any time if you think I'm talking. I mean, please just interrupt any time, no problem at all. So the format is the same. The short presentation, I'm going to throw some things out just to try and widen thoughts a bit, and then I want to focus mainly on questions, discussion. So we'll kind of be dealing with these things, but I'll come back to that in a minute. So the presentation bit is like music and HCI, what's in it for the electronic music practitioner. Okay, and so I'm going to be a little bit polemical. But in fact every assertion in this talk, there are actually citations for it if you want it, though I'm paraphrasing that a bit. Okay, so it's going to be what the hell is music and HCI, why musicians are already ahead in HCI, what kind of territory does this open up, and what can CHIME network do for you, what can you do for the CHIME network? Okay, so what is music and HCI? Well, yeah, sometimes abbreviated to music interaction, though that's very cheeky because evidently you can interact with the bass clarinet, you know, just as well as you can interact with the computer, but music interaction is often used as an abbreviation. And the thing is really, it's music HCI is designing, refining, evaluating, analyzing, using interactive systems that involve computer technology somehow for any kind of musical activity, not just performance, composing, teaching, all kinds of stuff. And it's typically collaborative between disciplines, but it can be the single person may have all those disciplines in effect. Okay, so why it is that musicians are already ahead in HCI. I was having a brief discussion with Mark about this, but let me sort of throw a bunch of chum into the water here, see what you think. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I think you probably know all these things, but I'm just trying to set the scene a bit. And like I say, citations available for everything here. So music, anthropologists say, is integral to being human. All know human cultures have music. the earliest identifiable, unambiguously musical objects go back at least 38,000 years ago, which seems to coincide with the emergence of behavioral and cognitive modernity. And if you look at those things, the sophisticated design suggests that they were very important in some unknown way. So as we know, music, obviously a lot of argument about this, but it may predate language, may have helped to precipitate it. This is a controversial area. Universal accessibility. Certainly one of the first social activities for the young. And if you've seen Holland's work, you'll know that newborn children in a complex musical surface where the beat isn't explicitly presented, newborns can elicit the beat. And that's known from experiments where you read the brain waves and do simple experiments and look for surprise and lack of surprise and so forth. As we know, it's one of the last social activities that people with dementia are able to engage with, and people close to death are able to engage with. And interestingly, it has important roles even in lowercase d and capital case D, deaf culture. Okay, so, right, why musicians are already headed in music. Right, so that was human, this is music. Okay, so some curious things about music. So as we, again, this is all stuff you know. Strange thing, amateur musicians develop often over decades virtuosic musical skills, and different amateur musicians dedicate their lifetime to refinement for its own sake in the absence of financial or other external incentive. There's a whole paper on this, looking at the strangeness of this, what's going on there. I mean, you don't have to be pleasing anyone else, but the depth in which people go into that. Centuries-old genres are still regularly studied and performed, yet radically new forms continually develop. I think that's probably true. Great recent book about Jay Diller, partially by a music, very interesting digging into that stuff. Anyway, so as we know, music involves the integration of a wide range of human capabilities: cognitive, sexual, motor, emotional, etc. Right? And indeed, if you do the EEG stuff, unlike most human activities, it lights up a lot of the brain. But it's not just a matter of the brain; it's highly embodied, as we know. Performers and listeners, routinely. I saw this guy on the station waiting for the train with his headphones in, and I think different parts of his body were entraining with, different temporal, layers. It was really, interesting to watch. Let's see. Performance on traditional and digital musical instruments requires precise real-time control of tight sensory motor loops, going down to millisecond level, controlling multiple dimensions. But of course, music has an abstract side, played key roles in development of science, mathematics, psychology and technology. So the computer bit, Pythagoras, of course. I mean, Pythagoras, big impetus, the tuning ratios thing for the whole realization of physical laws to be expressed mathematically. Some of the earliest formal notations of programmable automata. Let's see. Okay, well, bunch of recent theories of different areas of music in mathematics, computational neuroscience, psychology, through computers have found their way quite interestingly into musical practice. So as we know, technological developments can hugely change musical culture. Again, Jay Diller, not to mention many other developments. Musicians' creative use and misuse of technologies can actually affect the path of technology development inside and beyond music. I'll give 3 examples of that later. And so on, and so on, and so on. Let's see. And of course, we're not just talking about performance composition, we're talking about learning, listening, distribution, planning, so right. Okay, so we're nearly done. I'm 2/3 of the way through the initial bit, I think. So music and human-computer interaction, early links. This is actually Euler's diagram. Euler realized that symbolically harmony is at least two-dimensional, you know, arguably it's three-dimensional, etc., etc. There's a whole load of stuff on this. Anyway, okay, but early links between music and human-computer interaction. Well, and the relationship. I mean, the thing is, because of that deep engagement of music with so many human capabilities, music and human interaction has, over the history, the short history of human-computer interaction, been an incredible source of challenges, ideas, and new techniques. Okay, and in the early days, HCI was very wooden about it, and you just had these really appalling techniques like usability. So you got, you know, someone playing a musical instrument, what's usability? Please, you know. But in recent years, human-computer interaction has adopted wonderful, flexible methodologies, so that you would look carefully at what happens when someone uses a musical instrument, what happens with the listeners, what happens with the audience, and what happens with the makers. There are methodologies for delving into this in ways that actually tell you things. Let's see, and so forth and so forth. Okay, so dawn of human-computer interaction is in living memory. Admittedly, the very earliest things coming out of naval radar defense systems were 64, 68, two incredible pieces of work. But it is a fact that by 1970, literally 1771, the most advanced human-computer interaction system worldwide that was in daily use by non-technical users was the music machine. At Queen's University, Canada, photograph of it there, and Bill Buxton, who, depending on your generational where you are, you may be aware of Bill Buxton, was very much to do with this, and so most people, and big focus on things like bimanual input, gestural input, musical output. Really amazing early work. So music often changes human-computer interaction. I'm getting close to the end of this bit, folks. Okay, so so why? Well, because music needs rich, potent things to work on. And musicians obviously tend to be creative, although a lot of what musicians do, it turns out other professions need as well. And the key thing about musicians is they're willing to engage seriously on flaky systems day and night, frankly, so it makes them... Anyway, so in the 70s, just about everyone in HCI was thinking command line, with a few notable exceptions, but just about everyone was thinking typing stuff. And it was Buxton's music work that went a long way to getting gestural interaction to be a recognized thing. Then in the 80s, Thomas Zimmerman, working with Jaron Lanier, it's literally true that he wanted to play air guitar and hear it, so he invented the data glove, and this was, it's not the earliest virtual reality stuff, but I mean, it was Jaron Lanier working with Thomas Zimmerman who coined the term, made the first commercial system. It was very, very influential. And then more recently, certainly, we got the reactable Sergei Yorda, Barcelona crew, doing a load of stuff that had big influence on touch interaction, touch table stuff. In the present day, if you think of Rebecca Fiebring, her interactive machine learning stuff for music is very influential on interactive machine learning outside of music. Okay, so my political claim that musicians generally ahead of the game. Well, see, think about human-computer interactions. Okay, there are a load of methodologies, and when HCI is taught, often they just teach you these methodologies for evaluating stuff. But frankly, that's only that's the easy bit to pick up. The key thing is you've got to have the right intuition, you've got to have the right attitude, you've got to have the right perspectives and methods you can pick up easily. And musicians have got everything to be way ahead of the game on it. Anyway, so the CHIME network, which has only just started, we've only just been funded. Carola, I don't know if it's the correct pronunciation. Carola Beaumont, what's called her anyway, was one of our crew who applied for the network. So what we're going to try to do is connect and assist researchers beginning or established with interest in any combination of music and HCI. And we're going to certainly hit charities. So we're very interested in things like Drake music, Drake Scotland as well. We're interested in the deaf. We've got some projects already for music and the deaf. We've got some participants who are really into haptics and want to move haptics out into the world and are in a position to insert haptics centrally into virtual reality where it currently is not, and the metaverse. And there are huge opportunities to work with these generic robotics. There are big opportunities to work with them and say, hey, have you thought about this musical application of haptics that we really should be doing? So one of the things we're doing is, so in my department, I'm in a computer science department. We have weekly seminars. They're not always super interesting for me, not always, latest I'm in software engineering. What I want to know about music and human interaction. So one of the things we're doing is we simply have a seminar series, a virtual seminar series. And what we're trying to do is combine world-class people. We're having, our next speaker is going to be Francois Pache, who is head of research at Spotify, but he's also a great jazz guitarist and he's designed some amazing interactive systems. We're going to have monthly talks, and we want people from around the world with any kind of interest in music and HCI to come to that. But we're also going to have PhD students regularly presenting every month. We need to find out how to do this, workshops, training, visits, collaborations, and so forth. Right, so, fortunately, that's great. That's how I wanted to do it. I wanted the first 15 minutes to be presenting. Now, these would just be my boring questions. So what I'm saying is, this is what I'm claiming. I'm claiming you should be interested, but what do I know? Maybe you're not, maybe you are. So please hit me and ask me things, and yes, indeed.
Yeah, just a question. Half of my colleagues in digital media are in interaction design, and a significant part of that is CSCW, computer supported cooperative work. And I'm wondering, because I haven't really explored it, how much is, especially network music and those kinds of things, really, how much does that come up in CSCW? Because we have so much software that, especially since the pandemic, we've all become experts in performing remotely and collaborating with people remotely, and there's there's a burgeoning growth of new software specifically for remote and network performance. I'm just wondering, in the field of HCI, how much is music talked about in CSCW?
That is a simply fantastic point. Absolutely. So, Craig Latter, has produced some of these interesting systems. I'm not up to date on some of the new ones. Okay, great question. So in case anyone was confused, interaction design, human-computer interaction, essentially the same thing. It's essentially the same thing. CSCW, well, of course, post-COVID, etc. Remote collaboration, or in fact, hybrid collaboration is fantastically important. I think the answer is, I don't think people have realized, well, okay, so with music, you obviously want, under 10 millisecond, under 5 millisecond, this kind of thing.
Either that or you deal with them on
Yes, indeed. And I think this is of huge importance for everybody else outside of music. I don't think CSCW has quite realized it yet. And it's also super important for haptics, because if you're visually impaired, then one project I'm working on is getting low cost haptics, shared haptics into the metaverse, and indeed the latency thing is hugely important. Great question. Please hit me. Whoops, if I can stop for me. Please hit me. Ask me.
Maybe afterward I can give you a list of software that's tuned to sending audio across the world with the lowest possible latency.
Yeah, I mean, I've got one of my PhD students is a high-level professional drummer being flown out to LA all the time for sessions and so forth, and he's devising a drumming agent for expert drummers. He's devising something that you can trade fours with, trade eights with, if you're a professional drummer, and find it rewarding. And he's indeed, so I'll be very interested to hear more about that, please. Sorry, you are?
I'm sorry, Kerry Hagan.
Okay, thanks very much. So I don't believe that you're simply accepting this story that that music practitioners should be running out and just finding out a bit more about what's going on in human-computer interaction, because I think it's a source of side hustles. I think it's a source of resources. I think it's a source of ideas, etc., etc. But maybe I'm wrong. Put me right, please.
You've said a few times now that musicians are generally ahead of the game.
Yeah.
And you've said musicians are willing to engage on flaky systems.
Well, this was a
I kind of like to think that that's true.
Okay.
But is it true? Is there any evidence?
Well, okay. So I mean, obviously, everybody's already totally aware of NIME anyway, you know, and it's a fantastic conference, one of my favourites. I mean, but there's a ever so slight shift in perspective here, because in NIME, completely reasonably, you know, the whole focus is on just, you know, if this produces a fun piece of music, we're in, you know, and of course, I agree with that too, you know, but NIME doesn't always reflect on that, if you like, you know, it doesn't always, because, so in CHIME, which isn't in competition with NIME, so we're a network, and, you know, wait a moment, I mustn't lose track of the question. I think I've lost track of the question.
The question was, is it really true that we're so ahead of the game and so willing to engage on flaky systems, or are we just flattering ourselves?
I don't know, that's what I'm asking. I'm asking.
Well, I mean, it's a sort of, in this particular room, I imagine most people are.
Yeah,
because we're at a conference now.
Yeah.
But musicians can also be very conservative, can't they?
That's very true. Okay, so
very
let me
tied
be
to their particular interfaces.
Okay, let me be more specific then. Is anybody remotely interested in NIME, or can you see anything it might be able to do for you, or?
Well,
Yes.
This man's a chair.
Well, you know, Mark, if I can respond to that, I think that you know, I mean, there are musicians who are conservative, and they could, you know, if I could just sort of step out on a limb, this is just me, from, you know, off the top of my head, but I think that sounds right. That electronic musicians specifically, you might change that and say that electronic musicians and you know, music technologists are willing to go out on that flaky, edge, because, you know, I mean, that's what it's all about. It's about, you know, trying some new technology, and it doesn't always work. You know, we've all been at you know, an ICMC concert or something like that, where somebody's patch just blew up on them, or they brought the wrong cable, and you know, they didn't realize it, and you know, oh no, it didn't actually record the cello. Oh, you know, and like, why would we put up with that if not, you know, we're willing, you know, even as people sitting in a concert, why would we put up with that if not? I mean, if I go to, you know, if I go to an orchestra concert and they do that, I'm what's going on here? How dare they?
We put up with it because of the liveness of it, though. It's exciting, isn't it? And also in an orchestra concert. I was at a concert just in Manchester the other week, and the first violin, the string broke, and it was the most exciting thing that happened.
Yeah, you could hear that piece on YouTube, and it would be perfect. But you don't want perfect. You want something alive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd agree. I actually like latency in systems.
Yeah.
Because it feels, one of the things, because I'm a fiddle player, and I mostly play folk music, but I also do some fiddle. But one of the nice things about playing an instrument in space is different spaces behave differently, and sometimes you get a literal echo, sometimes it gives a nice set, sometimes it's bloody awful, and there's certain things you choose not to do in that space. And I think the latency thing can be like that. It's a bit of grit, it's a bit of resistance, it's a bit of something that you have to work with. And I don't feel it's so fulfilling if you've got a system that literally does everything it says on the tin. It's when it breaks, when it glitches, when it does something, okay, you're actually doing this live, aren't you? This is actually happening. Rather than you just going through the motions.
But that actually is very similar to what's just being said, because the same systems that network performers have developed in order to perform across the country, who recognize the inevitability of a certain degree of latency and work within that. That same software from the pandemic is now being used by schools and choirs and orchestras that needed to rehearse in local areas. So the latency was an issue, of course, since they were physically closer. So in a way, the latency was less, but the tolerances were also less. So it was an interesting perspective on the software that had been developed for networked performance, because now there were the conservative performers who needed it to be exactly immediate. And the pandemic totally changed the way people were approaching the software for network performance.
It's funny that we sort of import the needs from one practice into another. And I think something maybe gets lost in that process.
And then I wonder if 50 years from now, when whatever that technological problem is fixed, people will go back and try and recreate the work. Because it's retro.
Talk to Michael Clark, they're already trying to recreate old computing to make it, English that can, so very likely,
I mean, I've been doing network calls since around about 2002. And we had a long run project between Norwich Art School and Newcastle, and I used to teach at Norwich Art School. And then we were getting like 38 second latency, it was, traveling halfway around the world at sort of the speed of a fast car, But then because we knew that at some point something was going to come back as a reaction to what we've done. And of course the size of the latency would vary from minute to minute. Sometimes it comes almost straight back to you. And then suddenly you'd hear something coming back that they processed down in Norwich. And, I played that about a minute ago, and it was just this weird sort of elastic virtual space. It was great fun to play with, because you're being constantly surprised by what was coming back with you.
So who thinks CHIME is a waste of time?
No.
Or can anybody offer an example of anything it might? What should we be doing?
And I think before we get on to that, I think we've got a question.
Sorry.
Yeah, there's a question online. A couple of people have joined on Teams. Lauren Redhead. She's asked. She's got a question related to activities with deaf musicians. The project might not be at this stage. But are you looking to engage deaf musicians or deaf participants who are not currently musicians? And are there aspects of deaf identity and culture that are also part of that aspect of the project?
Okay, so
I think you might be able to speak, Lauren, as well, by the way.
Okay, so I'm extremely interested in this. Just to very briefly talk about the project. Okay, Double Crow's Eurythmics. Okay, everybody knows Double Crow's Eurythmics. So I wanted to improve my drumming skills So a few years ago, I designed these things, bracelets. You wear them on, you know, on all 4 limbs, and they're wireless, and you've got haptics, and they've got motion sensors, crucially. So you could have a drummer over here drumming, and you could have a student drummer over here, or thousands of them, or they could be remote, whatever. And you can feel what each limb is doing in real time. Now, I mean, you know, stimulus response, that'd be ridiculous, but that's not the thing we're talking about entrainment. You know, so if you're playing an interesting clave rhythm, shall we say, you know, you're thinking, here's the kick, here's the... I mean, you could be a complete beginner. It can be quite difficult to handle multiple strands of rhythm, you know, a polyphonic rhythm, especially for beginners. If it turns out that haptically, everybody has an internal haptic multi-channel mixer, you can easily say, oh, forget that. Oh, right, that one and that one. Ah, there's a simple relationship between those two. Ah, but wait, between that, and so forth. So we did this, but then we realized this was useful for if you've had a stroke, for gait rehabilitation. We applied it to that. But the thing we really wanted to do is work with either lowercase deaf or uppercase deaf community. And we need to find out where it fits in. Because at the moment, we're just starting to work with somebody doing samba and stuff. But I'm thinking maybe it would be better in a deaf school. You can imagine different applications for deaf from birth, people who are going deaf. I'm really, really keen to, sorry, I've been ranting on about it. I'm really, really keen to contact people who'd be interested in collaborating in any extent. I've got my wrong specs on, so I can't see the comments coming up. Sorry.
Yeah, I think we should be able to get audio, Lauren, if you've got a mic.
That'd be good.
I do, yeah. Could you hear me?
Great,
Yeah.
thanks. Fantastic.
Oh, yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'd be really interested to hear more about it. One of the reasons that I'm asking is because I have worked with a lot of deaf people in a different context who are not musicians and who feel strongly that deaf culture doesn't include music and includes other expressions that are artistic. So but I've also worked with deaf musicians and deaf young composers. So I'm just aware that there's really interesting tensions, but also all the things that you're describing sound really interesting as well. So I can put my email address in the chat of the meeting, and then...
Please, and in fact, could you also email me at s.holland@open.ac.uk?
Yeah, I will do. Thank you very much.
Okay, fantastic, Chris. And could I just ask, where are you based? Just
I work in Goldsmiths.
Oh, fantastic, great, yeah. Okay, thanks, Lauren. Definitely be in touch. Okay.
Real-time networking, the benefit of conferences, right there. Coming back to, I think.
Well, so just say, see, we know I mean, so we didn't know how to do this because we never done it before. Pardon me. But so one thing we want to do is there's PhD students all around the world doing this kind of stuff. So we want to hand out a Twitter feed week by week to different people. There's people down at Goldsmiths and various different places who know loads about particular things, interactive machine learning, haptics, some amazing stuff to do with interaction. Some amazing stuff to do with the inner ear and so forth. And we need to figure out whether to do physical workshops, depending on the thing being taught, or online workshops. Jesus. So I'll stop. Say something, please.
Maybe this could be as I look at that list of questions, there's a humongous list of questions, and there's probably only a fragment of issues you're trying to raise. And I'm scratching my head and I'm saying, well, what is CHIME trying to do that CHIME is not already?
Well, okay, so, okay, there's two levels to this. There's sort of theoretical, if you like, and practical, if you like. So NIME is fantastic. We love NIME, and everybody wants NIME. NIME is great. But from my perspective, one thing it doesn't quite do is when something interesting comes up to do with music and interaction, generally NIME doesn't say, "Why? Is there something interesting going on there? What could it be? How could we use that in some other way? How could we develop it further? What's missing?" I think that's part of it. But another part of it, this is maybe unfair, is in the name. We've got new instruments for musical expression. And sure, NIME is much wider than it used to be, but still it's quite a lot about musical expression, and why not? You know, that's a fantastic thing to be about. But in fact, interactivity and music have fertile meeting places quite apart from just musical expression. There's lots of other places. That's part of it. The other thing is that, like I say, I want at least every month to have a great talk online about something that is to do with music and interactivity, you know. And we should be able to get top people from around the world and up-and-coming PhD students to have that regularly. CHIME is supposed to be UK-based, that's what it's funded for, you know, but we're going to try and get in much wider. NIME isn't trying to build relationships with industrials and researchers as a thing, and we are. It's not trying to build relationships with charities on an ongoing basis, and we are. Let me see. One of the things about music and human-computer interaction, music and interactivity is, and Carola did a fantastic paper about this, nearly maybe 20 or 30 years ago, where she looked at where it was happening in the UK, and it would be in a different department, in a different university, you know, be in technology or mathematics or computer science or music or something, and consequently it never kind of got the, I mean, things have changed somewhat, but still people are scattered. So there's somebody in Huddersfield or whatever, or in Edinburgh, who really needs something for their PhD, and there's a group down at Goldsmiths who know about it, but you can't really get the training, and that's one of the gaps we want to close. Was that some kind of answer? Okay.
So would it be fair to say that you're interested in kind of applying existing knowledge and existing techniques rather than exploring new knowledge?
Exploring new. I mean, what can I say? So one thing I wanted to say, I love this discussion about latency, because, you know, everybody knows that you've got cathedral music, you know, which works in a certain way, and you've got asymmetrical music, and everybody knows that what a conductor is doing with their gestures is a different form of time from what, you know, a rock band or a rapper is doing, you know, and we know that that, you know, some producers are thinking really, really creatively about timing and meter. And one of the things about the music and human computer interacting is it just doesn't have to be gizmos, you know, gadgets, technology. In part, it's that you can step back and take that perspective. So the conservatism thing, okay, common music notation, you know, if you're talking about harmony, then common music notation is your thing. But of course, we have various versions of the tonets, you know, we have various mathematically, computer sciencely, psychologically inspired pitch spaces. In rhythm, we have kind of stuff that Ethan Hine is doing, but we have the kind of stuff that Andy Milne and that big book by that big guy, you know, all the interesting new theories of rhythm. It's this amazing thing where it turns out the theories of, I'm sorry, I've gone blank on it. Big book about rhythm and the mathematical theories thereof, something anyway, and so of course some musicians aren't at all interested, but a lot of, so I'm saying it's not just technology, it's the attitude, saying, God, yeah, new stuff, come on, you know, we've got our PhD students and we're neophiles like crazy, but we also respect tradition. Sorry, I've stopped. More questions, please.
Yeah, first I want to apologize that I missed your introduction, most of your introduction as the day job got in the way. So before I offer a couple of thoughts, could you probably said this already, but what is EPSRC about this bid?
EPSRC about this bid. Okay, so I don't know if you guys know, but EPSRC is the like technology funder. You know, it's not AHRC, it's EPSRC, it's like computer science, physics.
And they say that the grant would have to be 50% or more EPSRC worthy.
Absolutely not. It's whatever the hell we like.
Oh, well, I was on a panel that it's quite a few years ago. Coming in as an artist in a musicologist. There were people from, Queen Mary there as well. And the idea is how we're going to deal with music technology. This is EPSRC. And what came out of the meeting is if the bid is 50% or more EPSRC, they'll host it. And if it's less, then they have to send it to HRC, ESRC, or wherever.
Well,
so that's why I'm asking. What is the EPSRC component of this in the first instance?
What's the EPSRC component of this in the first instance? Well, I mean, if you want to see the bid, Carol has got a copy. Let me see.
That's not needed. It's just
no.
Questions like
I know.
How do social science methodologies can they be adapted to collaborative music interaction? That's a really relevant question that could be developed in a form that is EPSRC worthy. But
I will come back to this slowly. But a network has to
I'm sorry to the others because you saw.
No, not at all. No, not that one, not that one. Okay, don't worry about it. I'll just come back to your questions because they're fun to have up there. Oh, there we go, yeah. So it's a network, right? So we don't have to do research as such. Of course, all the component people do research. But what we have to do is that's what we have to do. That's the answer.
That's clear.
Sorry.
That answers my question.
Sorry, I got there in the end. I have.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, we have got some other ones, but I think this is the most fun one. Thank you for the question. Great question.
Well, so I'll go back to that one. How can the social science methodologies be adapted to collaborative music?
Okay, so
that's a really good question, and I'm going to give you a partial answer.
Oh, thank you so much.
As a specialist in collaborative practice. They can be applied in so many ways. We take up the rest of the time, but the most important thing is they would be applied to document and evaluate process and product from the point of view of the developers, those involved in the project, and those receiving the project, because those are three different journeys. And this is done far too little. In the arts, the whole question of documentation is huge. Just to give a short example, I deal with loads of PhDs in music, and you get the documentation that you might expect, recordings of concerts, or recorded pieces that are on fixed medium, so on and so forth. In dance, your external examiner must attend a performance. If there's technology or not, they don't want just a recording because they're not having the embodied experience of situating this. So then in practice-based research in the arts, the documentation side is absolutely huge and not resolved. So social sciences can offer a huge amount of experience and methodologies to document, evaluate from the perspectives of all relevant constituents. That would be my answer to that.
So what I would say is that's bang on the money. I agree 100%. let me just mention two things going along with that. So one thing is, there is a particular interesting problem, which is if you're doing music and human-computer interaction in a computer science department, right? Now the problem there is you're going to have to get past probation, you're going to have to get past examiners who, as you say, may be thinking contribution to knowledge, what's this got to do with computer science, and so forth, right? So for people in that context, there's a very interesting problem of translating the kind of methodologies you're talking about so they are intelligible to computer scientists. And so a fantastic example of that is Wendy Mckay over in Paris these days. And oh, beautiful PhD by Jeremy, oh, I've forgotten his last name. Anyway, very good guy. And this amazing tool that he'd made, of course, the whole thing was getting a composer to use it and drill into what the hell was happening. But Wendy had to do this virtuoso stuff to make the methodology intelligible to a computer. And in fact, in NIME, we've got 9 workshops coming up, and CHIME has a workshop in NIME, which is in fact dealing with this problem of it's bring your PhD problem, and our team of amazing worldwide people, including Wendy, will try and help you figure out methodologies that actually help you answer the question you really care about, which is going to be to do with music, you know, rather than something ludicrous like
usability.
usability.
Just ever so briefly.
Please.
Because this connects it with the EPSRC question. I'll speak about something that I'm hoping to send into the EPSRC soon. I'm working with 3 people in computer science and a colleague in music. And it's not about musical practice in this case, it's about a resource site that's online that's relevant to electroacoustic music that many people in the room will know. It's called EARS. And we want to use AI-related approaches to automate the acquisition that would be relevant to this particular resource. So I've got data analytics, information retrieval, even music information retrieval in the project. It's perfectly clear for all of us that it cannot go to EPSRC because it's not original knowledge in engineering computer science. It is applied engineering computer science that's going to be extremely novel in the arts, humanities, and social science. Therefore, we go to the poor cousin, which is the Arts and Humanities Research Council. That's just how it goes. And so what we're talking about here is applying methodologies like from social science, applying interaction design, might be from computer science, and applying musical approaches, which are from music. And that seems to me the exciting opportunity for your network.
Well, for the first time, I will beg to differ in that I think the kind of work that you're talking about probably could be framed so that EPSRC understood there were original contributions to knowledge intelligible to STEM. So by way of evidence, I'm involved in an EU project, Polyphonia, where we're looking at musical resources accessible online, like all of them. It's a very big project. We're looking at how these can be rendered accessible, manipulable, interesting to interested musical scholars, musical practitioners, musical parties, and where the gaps are, what this shows the technology is missing, and so forth and so forth. And it is very difficult to do these framings, but I think there do tend to be, well, it can be very hard, but I believe typically there really is new knowledge to science lurking there that can be dug out with, anyway, so that's what I'm saying.
We've got about 5 minutes left. I know Kerry's had her hand up a few times.
No, it's all right, I passed.
You passed? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. You have a question?
So I thought maybe it relates to your third question of and the discussion you're just having. So this issue of feeling like somehow if you're doing mime type research, that you have to try to get funded, you have to conform to this expectation that you're going to be able to measure something objectifiable and using HCI methods to do that. But of course, what we find is, and so we end up in this weird situation as musicians, where what we probably actually care about cannot be readily objectified. And particularly we're talking about tools to amplify creativity. Well, how in the hell are you going to measure that, right?
So I missed
how in the hell are you going to measure whether a tool actually amplifies creativity or not?
Yeah.
You might do a sleight of hand where you can pretend that you are, but maybe that's precisely where the value lies. The implication that music can bring to the broader HCI is actually saying, well, damn right, this is important,
Yes.
and we have to struggle to find ways to talk about things that are really meaningful to people in a deep way,
Yes.
that are yet not easily objectified,
Yes.
which music epitomized par excellence, right? So.
I mean, are meant both to this strand here, because I mean, I've been, you know, I've been supervising PhD students in this area for a long time now, and in the early days, it was really hard to get the questions that we wanted to ask because we kind of weren't allowed to for the reasons you are saying. But Wendy Mckay in particular and Jeremy Garcia's PhD and technology probes, okay. But I think one of the things that I want the network to do is to try and help synthesize these methodologies. It's just one of the jobs. I want us to have a load of fun with those stuff, you know. But one thing I'd love us to do would be to find and disseminate methodologies that let people ask the questions that are really important in music and interaction and get funded for them, you know, by science money and so forth.
Bennett.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is the place to sort of mention, but maybe afterwards we can talk about more detail. But I'm co-PI on a Leverhulme project at the minute on the aesthetics of data sonification, because the sonification scientists say there's no such thing as aesthetics in data sonification. It's simply the objective representation of complex data, usually on a MIDI marimba in C major. You know. And so what we're doing is it's six of us, across computer science, composition and free improvisation, who are trying to devise a system whereby we are actually what you're saying, Brett, actually trying to put the kind of knowing through doing knowledge that we take for granted, that sort of tacit knowledge as musicians, and to try and find ways to use it to, in a sense, train computer scientists to design better sonification systems, not because they're more complex, but because they actually take account of the aesthetic subject position, as Eric Clark calls it, that we bring to any instance of listening. And so we're working with, computer science, but all of us, the computer scientists, we work together every week. The computer scientists have been learning to do free improv with us, which has been amazing. Seriously,
Just really free.
if you want to see somebody have a road to Damascus experience,
But this is why I was
Just
ranting.
amazing, because you can do it. We're using John Stevens' Search and Reflect. You know, it's designed to, you know, if you can make a sound, you can learn to improvise. And we've just been working through that for the last year and a half now. And so what and in the process of that, we're now starting to incorporate autoethnographical approaches. But actually, this is where the documentation thing gets problematic, because one of the things we noticed is when you document something and look back at it yourself as the participant, it doesn't sound or look like it did when you were doing it. So we've been working with these people in Spain on what's called fuzzy cognitive maps, which is it's actually a computer program. It's a really useful computer program. You just get people to sit around and talk about what they just did, and it collects things, and you can start to, and you can move it around, and you collectively build these cognitive maps about what it was you just did, and then you can use that as the basis to design a much more quantitative kind of questionnaires. that actually is asking the right questions that you already have the answers for. And it's not a sleight of hand at all. It comes out of a completely phenomenological, collective process.
It's the sort of process we would do if we were rehearsing a composition, except what we're doing is we're trying to articulate it verbally and sort of cognitively.
I definitely want to hear more.
So
about
it's kind of, I mean,
I think that there are ways that what we do, we know it's knowledge, we know it's real knowledge, it's concrete stuff, and there's just ways of approaching it that we can represent it as such more effectively to people who maybe aren't inside of that system and don't take for granted that doing something. Oh, I can see what you mean now. And we're just using old Wiimotes and mobile phones as ways for data scientists to learn how to improvise with very simple sounds and stuff. And then to get them to actually design their own interactive sonification systems that conforms to their aesthetic subject matters, rather than us saying, we're going to design a better song. No, you design your own bloody sonification. We'll teach you how to do it.
And it's a really, really important issue I want to talk to you.
It's a small group of us, but the things we've discovered in it are kind of amazing, actually.
Right, thank you, Bennett.
Stuff we already knew, but never got around to putting into words.
Plenty to discuss after the session. Unfortunately, our hour is up. That was very interesting. Thank you very much. That's good.